A shot of JD.
Conversations from Oklahoma City.
I know y'all looking for me. I'm here. I'm here. Yeah!
And you're probably asking yourself, why did it take so long?
You're lucky if you're able to have a career that goes long enough that people want to hear your take on life.
Please do not interrupt me when I'm making a point.
All of you are probably familiar with the sponsored radio programs which are rapidly becoming the highest type entertainment features on broadcasting stations.
Oh, ye of little face. Want a cookie?
Please listen carefully. Welcome, my friends. It's been a while. It's the Shot of JD with Friends podcast. I'm your host, Jason Doyle. Yes, it's been a while. My apologies. I have been carried away. As we know, the Shot of JD podcast is just a hobby for me. As a professional broadcaster, I'm supposed to get paid for this kind of thing, but this is my hobby. And so it's whenever I get a little extra time to do this podcast, that's what I do. So it's going against the rules of your standard podcast if you want to grow it and be the next, Joe Rogan or something like that. That's not what this is all about. This podcast is simply just really a hobby for me to be able to get to know how to do all this kind of good stuff and play around and stuff like that. So because those skills come in handy in what I do for a living. But I still have fun doing the Shot of JD podcast in general and the Shot of JD with Friends podcast specifically because I get to bring in and introduce people that I run around with to my audience. And I love that. And one of the people that I'm going to introduce is also my excuse why I haven't done a Shot of JD podcast in a while, because we're working together on a documentary. It's a project I've kind of wanted to take on. And if you kind of followed me along, you know that I've always been an aspiring filmmaker somewhat. And couldn't do that here in Oklahoma when I was growing up, so I became a radio guy, became a professional broadcaster. And that's where I am today. However, I'm also 50 years old, and instead of having a midlife crisis, which features a brand new sports car, I'm helping to create a documentary at 50 years old and actually making my first film. And this is something I want to continue a little bit later. So Holly Howard is my co-producer on this film, and she's actually the subject or one of the subjects of this film. It is about domestic violence. It's about child neglect, child abuse. And it's about domestic abuse, because there's a little bit of nuanced difference between domestic violence and domestic abuse. Holly Howard is a woman here in Oklahoma who is raising two of her grandchildren who were witness to domestic abuse and domestic violence, and dealing with the trauma of that and the fallout of growing up with the knowledge that the person that was your primary caregiver was abused. And so the documentary is called The Pieces Which Remain. And Holly and I are working together. Now, it'll be a while before the full production is done and where it'll be at, whether it's going to be some streaming service or we're going to go on the film circuit or whatever. But it is being made right now. We're doing a lot of shooting of interviews and different things like that to put this all together. So once again, the project is called The Pieces Which Remain, and it talks a lot about domestic abuse and domestic violence and the result of what happens to the kids who may or may not be abused during that situation, but they sure know what's going on. Holly and I also talk about how we met, and it involved Jesse Jackson. Yes, the Reverend Jesse Jackson helped us forge a friendship together that's lasted a few years, but it's really gotten intense over the last few months. And we're also going to talk about the importance of having this tough conversation about domestic violence, because it's not just, it just doesn't impact the couple that's involved. It has impact on our society, and we've got to have an honest conversation about that. And that's what we're hoping this project is. Also, for the Shot of JD fans, we're going video. Video's not going to kill this radio star, though. over on my YouTube page, the Jason Doyle Media YouTube page, we're going to start doing a video version of the Shot of JD podcast. So that's coming soon. So stick around for that. Go subscribe to the Jason Doyle Media YouTube page. You can find that on, they've got those new handles now. So you put the @Jason Doyle Media in and you'll go find that YouTube page. But let's get on with this interview, our conversation with Holly Howard. It's a very fun interview. It's also a very fun conversation. It's a very important conversation. And we kind of set the stage of the excuse of why I haven't done a Shot of JD podcast in quite some time.
A Shot of JD.
All right, I'm sitting across the table from a friend of mine who we've been spending a lot of time working together over the last few months. In fact, she's here to explain why I haven't done a Shot of JD podcast in several months. And that's why we're doing this Shot of JD podcast, is to actually kind of, it's an organizing party almost right now, what we're going through.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
An organizing party.
An organizing party. So a few months back, if you remember, I did this little creator's log type thing or something like that, trying to spark off some creative projects, because I've been looking for creative projects to do. And just something on in my spare time, because I've been drug away from a lot of the creative I enjoy doing at work. So I've got to fulfill that scratch. And so went off and said, hey, I do these different little projects or something like that, or try to see if there's something out there I can do. And then Holly gets a hold of me and says, hey, let me take you to dinner. I want to tell you a story. And that story changed the course of what I was planning on doing, from doing these little frivolous creative projects to keep me busy to something that actually I've gotten very passionate about. And I'm really, really glad that that you came along and,
blew your life up.
Pretty much, yeah. Pretty much. It was, and it's an important message, and we'll talk a little bit about it, but I really did want to say thank you and let people know this is why I'm away, is because of this project that you've enlisted me on, and I'm glad you've enlisted me, and this has been a hell of a last few months. It's been a heck of a ride, and things are kind of accelerating, so it may be another minute or two before another Shot of JD gets out there, and it may be an update like this of what we're doing. So we're actually putting together a documentary about domestic violence and the children who have witnessed domestic violence through the eyes of a grandparent who is raising her grandchildren. And it sounds very innocuous. It sounds very, very innocuous at first. It sounds heavy. Yeah. I mean, it still has that heavy sound, but it's like, ooh. But yeah, you let me peek into seeing what was going on, and it's wow. And then numbers come out, and here in Oklahoma this week, this last month, we find out we're number 2 in the rate of domestic violence. The first time that's happened in the state's history.
No, we're number 1 in the rate of domestic violence occurrences for women, but we're number 2 in domestic violence homicides.
Oh, okay. So I see I misread the numbers.
That's, yeah.
So
50% of women will experience domestic abuse.
So let's talk a little bit about the project here. We're putting this together, and we're trying to figure out kind of the format it's going to be, because it really kind of depends on a lot of different things. But something took off, and we're putting things together, and there'll be a more public face to some of this stuff. But really, this is telling your story.
Well, I will say, I'm going to correct you.
Okay. I'm used to it now.
I was going to say, as always. So it's really not my story. I know you and I, we've had this kind of go back and forth on this, because you tend to say, well, yeah, it is your story too, but it really isn't my story. And the reason why I'm doing this isn't really for me so much as it's for my granddaughters. It's their story, and also it's for all the other people that are out there. Not even at first, it was the people that were experiencing this or had experienced this, but I think that sort of evolved to also just the general population needs to be more informed, because the impact isn't just on those that are involved directly. It affects all of us. So, and I remember like the night we went to dinner, and we sit down and like you were telling me, I don't even know how we got on this comment. Well, we hadn't seen each other for a while, and I think that is just because of circumstances. And so you were telling me kind of what had been going on in your life, and we got off on like our younger years and stuff, and you kind of gave me this version of your life experiences, and which was sort of an opposite of my life experience currently as a grandmother raising her grandchildren. And so it was when I heard your story and you were telling me this, and I was sitting there thinking in my mind, like, okay, I could just say, great to see you again and leave, or I could turn your world upside down. And, that's what I did, was I turned your world upside down. And I think you made a joke of like, nobody else has been able to like hear from you, and that's my fault. And I'll take that.
Well, yeah, because
I'll take it.
I mean, but a lot of it has to do and it's not just you. There's other things that take my time too. Just to be fair, because I do dabble in a whole lot of different things. So that's to be fair.
Yes.
But this has taken a lot of my time up.
But I warned you.
Yes, you warned me.
I did.
I got fair warning. I cannot say I was not warned.
I told you.
And I was very appreciative that I had that fair warning, because it really did happen. I mean, it really has changed, because now there's some advocacy that I didn't have before. There's a lot of knowledge about domestic violence and how it really manifests. As someone who prides himself on being an education-based reporter, when I say education-based reporter, I've won awards in covering education in Oklahoma, and somebody that's proud of those awards, and somebody that that kind of keeps an eye, even though I really don't have a dog in the fight, other than maybe I'm going to hire some of these kids that graduate one of these days. It was kind of, all right, I hear about these ACEs. I'm hearing all about these ACEs and trauma-informed learning. And it really didn't become clear until I started to get involved with this story and how they manifest themselves and what it means and what we've really got to do. And there's a big misunderstanding out there that really has to be corrected when it comes to how domestic violence affects children, even when they're not being abused themselves, they're just the witness to it.
And not even, and I'm, okay, so we're Chris saying things I have to correct. I'm going to blame it on you, because it's not even that they're the witness, because they don't even have to ever see it. It's they live in a household where it's happening, and they feel it, and they know it, and they sense it, and the energy is wrong, and so they don't ever have to see. And a lot of times, that really the most damaging part of domestic abuse or intimate partner abuse, coercive control, whatever label you want to give it, because it's ever changing. It isn't even the physical part of it. It's all the stuff that's happened to be able to get to the point of you're going to be able to hit a woman, and I'm using these pronouns, man and woman. The predominant victims are women, but that is not to say men do not experience victimization as well. But children don't have to see it. And it still has an impact on them. A dramatic, life-changing, life course altering impact on who they are, who they will be, and who they will become.
And so now we're working on that story, and we're working on telling that story and getting that information out, and so much more. We're just kind of scratching the surface here. But I just wanted to introduce people to you, because you're so much more than what we're going to do with this documentary, and however it manifests itself and stuff like that. Because one of the other things we want to do is provide resources, and I think that's a little bit because of your background of being an advocate and how we met.
Antagonist.
Actually, you've been an important voice. You've been an important voice for our community. And years ago, when I had the local radio show here in Oklahoma City, our mutual friend Scott Mitchell said, "Hey, you need to meet Holly Howard. You've got to know who she is. She's somebody you need to know." It's like, all right, well, let me meet this Holly Howard. And so we actually met when somebody was in town.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, governments don't always make the best decisions for the community, for the population of the people that live within their districts or states, or our federal government doesn't make the right decisions sometimes. But I've always just sort of believed that we are put on this planet to make the lives of other people better. And typically, vulnerable, marginalized populations are going to be people that have no voices. They're not going to be heard. They're not going to be seen. They're going to be swept away, looked over. And so I've just sort of always been drawn to being involved in those people's lives. And so I at the time when we met, was doing advocacy work for individuals that had developmental disabilities. And we were a state in a severe budget crisis, and they were cutting all the social service programs. That's where they were trying to locate the money to pay the bills. And they had made repeated cuts through emergency processes to be able to cut out of the budget that was set for the previous year. And huge amounts of money were being pulled from services that support people that try to help them live independently because they had closed the institutions, rightfully so. And so we were expecting another big cut to come, upwards of 25%, which would have been devastating. It would have meant the loss of life for people. And so we had done some protests at the Capitol, and some, media campaigning, and really trying to get, and this at the same time, like going and meeting with legislators and actually telling them, and having the individuals that could get into the Capitol, which wasn't really, set up to allow people with a lot of physical challenges to be able to access. But, to be able for them to go tell their stories. And that was not working. And so we were fortunate to get to have somebody come to our state and really speak on the behalf of not just people with disabilities, but vulnerable populations, people in poverty and all the people that are primarily accessing those social supports that they were cutting the money out of. So, we had Jesse Jackson, Reverend Jesse Jackson, come and do a press conference and speak on, the vulnerability of people, and that as a state, we have responsibilities to them, and that's where we met. So,
and I had you on my radio show
right
after that,
multiple times.
Yes, because that's something that it was like, wait a second, there's a lot we can cut, but let's not cut this. There's a lot that, and when you're talking about those who are really trying to be less of a burden, by living independently, a little bit of help goes a long way.
Yeah.
And so that was one thing I was very proud of my radio show that I was able to do, is bring advocacy up front and say, hey, we've got some, I love the city. And that was the focus. It was Oklahoma City, it was Oklahoma in general, but Oklahoma City specifically, because I love the city. And I really, really wanted that to be that focus for that particular show, because I had not heard local radio in a while, so to speak. I had heard plenty of people be able to mock and parrot what they heard nationally, but I didn't hear a lot of people even talking about what was going on in Oklahoma City. And one of my favorite radio shows that I love to listen to, even online to this day, is a local Kansas City afternoon talk show. And it really doesn't always do politics, but it always does Kansas City. And so it was like, all right, this is the kind of show I want. I want an Oklahoma City show. I want somebody that can do that, but I want to show everything. I want to show that there are communities and people who can use our help, especially because of the nature of the audience I knew that was going to naturally be there at that particular radio station. They had a little bit of change in their pockets, And so if you could connect that audience with those people who needed the resources, maybe I could bridge that gap and let these folks that at least the ratings indicated they like to listen to me. So maybe I could connect. And that's really what, and a lot of people were like, why don't you, try to reach out and do celebrities, or, you always talk about the Thunder, but you never try to get the Thunder on or anything like that. And I'm like, well, because I've only got 2 hours.
Right.
And yeah, I can do all that, and that's all good and fine.
There's plenty of people doing that.
Yeah, there's plenty of people doing that. There's not a lot of people doing these local issues and stuff like that. So you were able to help me do that. But it's interesting where you come to people and what they envision you being.
Right.
So there was a gap where at the beginning of my career, I was playing a character on a morning show. It was, and I'm hesitant to use the name simply because not a lot of people even know what the name means anymore.
Right.
Because the name had some meaning back then. But the Richie Cunningham, if you're not familiar, was a character on Happy Days, which is a sitcom that played in the 70s and 80s. Redheaded guy. It happened to be Ron Howard. Ron Howard's also from Oklahoma. We all had this idea, oh, okay, great. We'll just call him Richie Cunningham because he's a redheaded kid.
I think
from Oklahoma.
I think it fits.
And it fit back then. It was very good, but
it fits now.
Well, it fits now because you know who Happy Days, and you've watched Happy Days. You know what Happy Days is.
No, I mean, it fits I think it's a good fit for you.
I that nobody knows who the hell I am anymore because I've gotten old.
You're a Richie Cunningham.
What? I found my thrill in Blueberry Hill?
No, he just that kind of. I don't want to use the word innocent, but just sort of that presence of innocence, naivety. Dork.
Dork, you can, yeah. Dork, yes. I can get that. Naivete, I'm too old.
Not that you're naive.
Yeah.
But just that presence of that or appearance of that. Just, you're a nice guy.
Well, why does that have to be in naivete?
Richie Cunningham was just a nice guy, and he was sort of, and that was generational too from that
Right.
time frame. You know, it was.
Well, you
kind
also
of
had the
like-
Fonz. The Fonz was,
Yeah, he
hey,
was the bad
yeah.
boy.
And then you had the talkative one, and then you had the good-looking kind of guy that would look good in the yearbook, and then
Yeah,
when you come back for the 20-year reunion, he's bald and fat.
yeah.
Yeah. So
Well, you don't have to worry about that.
trust me, I've been back to my reunions.
Yeah.
Who knew that I would age like fine wine? And some of my friends, not so much. I mean, I've got friends who have lost body parts within the last few years and things like that. And
That's not funny.
it's
sad.
not funny, but it is, because one of those friends, diabetic, lost some toes, and so he has a tattoo on his foot now, pointing with a sign pointing down to one of the missing toes, saying, "This little piggy went to market."
Okay, that's kind of funny.
So it's funny.
Yeah, that's pretty
I mean, sense of humor. It's all depends on your sense of humor, and these are the people I hang with. So. Yeah. So despite losing body parts, that's the other thing. You know, I had arthritic flare up recently that put me in bed for 4 days, couldn't walk. And it's just creeping up my spine. So one of these days, there's the very real possibility I could not be able to walk anymore. I could be in a wheelchair. And I, being right ahead of Halloween, I immediately went to go, what kind of cool costumes could I do in a wheelchair? And my first thing was X-Men. I'm going to be Professor Xavier. I'm going to shave my head.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
I'm going to do that.
No, you have to wear a bald cap.
Well, I'll probably
can't
wear
get
a
rid
bald
of the
cap.
good
Yeah,
hair.
yeah. See, that's my weak point. That's why I've never shaved the head. I've never gone short and shaved.
I've been bald.
Yeah, really?
Yeah.
I did not know
Shaved
that.
my hair.
What was it?
So
Now you're gonna have to tell the story.
yeah. So middle school sucks.
Right.
We can talk all day about middle school. You know, my name and everything else. And so my mother, in all her wisdom in the 70s, decided that I needed to have a perm. Now, you can't. I'm assuming these people can't see me. I currently have my hair straightened. So,
well, some of them, because
you
we're
know,
actually going to do this
it's
podcast with video.
straight,
So.
But I don't
Right.
have straight hair.
Right.
I have great 80s hair
Yes.
all the time without Aquanet.
As I have said, your hair has its own personality.
Yes, you have.
Yes.
Yes. And that's without Aquanet. So it's, I have curls and body and lots of hair. And this has always been this way. So, I didn't need help with curls or perms, or I did not. But apparently that was what my mom decided. And she had this great idea that I should get a perm. And, when you're 12, 13, 14, mom's taking you. So we went to J.C. Penney. Because, of course,
yeah, they've got a salon there in the back. Yeah, right next to the
70s,
restrooms.
That's what you do.
Right.
You go to the J.C. Penney salon, which I guess is better than Sears. But we went to J.C. Penney's and they put a perm in my hair, which proceeded to give me, I don't know, 3rd-degree burns on my scalp. I mean, I'm like, I can remember sitting there like, is this supposed to hurt? Because my scalp was on fire and I'm thinking, what is happening? It's like, child abuse in the form of a permanent. And, they take it all. I mean, we were there for hours. They take it all down, the rollers out and stick me under the little cap hair dryer. And then they finally get me in front of the mirror and I looked like a poodle. I looked like Bozo the Clown. My hair, I had a great afro, but, I'm a little white girl that lives in suburbia, and I'm 13. I didn't want to have an afro, and it was huge, and it was frizzy and damaged and awful. just awful. And I can remember just bawling hysterically all the way home. I'm like, there's no way I'm going to school with my hair like this, you know. And this was about the time that, you know, children get this place where they're like, oh, well, you don't get to tell me what I'm going to wear anymore. I can actually independently kind of select my own style. And up to that point, you know, my mom always had me in these little cute outfits, you know, like coordinating bell bottoms and shirts, some of which, you know, back in the 70s, mom sewed, and, you know, little, my 5th grade school picture, I have like my collar buttoned all the way up on this cute little plaid shirt. And I have like a little bow ribbon tied right here, pink. And so this was the first year that, you know, it's like, I'm not wearing your little ribbons, you know, and I was kind of eclectic in my style. And so I went home and, you know, of course, she tries to do all the stuff. She's like washing it, doing all these things, trying to calm it down, which isn't going to work. And so waited for her to go to bed, and I took out the razor and shaved my head bald because I was not going to school with that hair, a poodle do. And so I had a bald head.
Wow. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So you took the route of, I would rather be bald than have the permed head.
Hell yeah. If you'd have seen my hair, you'd have been bald too, I promise.
So my mom was a cosmetologist, or she was studying to be a cosmetologist. She actually did do it, and, you know, she graduated and had her booth in salons and stuff like that. But we got practice upon, and yeah, the sun will come out tomorrow. I was Little Orphan Annie for a short time.
I love it.
So yeah, but actually what came up in Facebook memories this week was an old photo, because my mom, it's been about 2 years ago, my mom passed away on Halloween. And so we had gone through pictures, and so that came up, and it was a picture of my mullet getting permed.
Oh, but that was an in thing.
That was it wasn't just
Isn't
the
it back
thing.
in?
It was the 80s. It's kind of going back in, but that's because of Stranger Things. It's back to the 80s echoes.
Yeah.
But the real reason why I was doing it is trying to fit in with the FFA kids.
Oh, well, yeah.
You know, because I was, at that point in time, I was an FFA, and I was a green hand, and, you know, that was the 80s style. And, you know, so business up front, party in the back. Just the way it was always intended, I guess.
I was pretty, I think, you know, for a bald young girl, I was rocking it, you know. My head has a good shape. And so.
See, that's hard for me to discuss, because I don't know if my head's got a good shape or not. I've seen
It's scary when but, you know, at that point, I didn't care.
It's, well, my grandparents, my grandfathers, you know, my grandfather on my mom's side is one that was bald, and he had kind of that, I don't know. It was a good shape, I guess. I don't know.
Was it lumpy?
No, he didn't have the lumpy head, but that's what I'm worried about. And then I've got like little moles or something in the crown of my head.
You got to keep your hair.
So it's
no mold.
I don't know. I'd have to get them removed or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's kind of somewhere on the crown up there.
Yeah.
Somewhere right there. But yeah.
Keep your hair.
And then it's like, I love my stylist, Kristen. She's my stylist. She's kept me going for years now. Because I stalk her. It's just like, hey, wherever you go, I'm going. Because once you get somebody that's good with your hair, you don't let that go. And I know I might sound as close as I can to
so
vain or whatever, but shoot, you know, that's part of the business I'm in, is vanity. You know, you got to care about the way you look.
Well, and like you're saying, if you got molly head, you don't, you know, you got
more.
hair. Come on.
Right. Well, and you know, it's pretty nice. It's doing the shading in gray, And the way it's going, it's looking really good.
You know, that whole men can be gray and they're just, you know, distinguished. That's why my hair is this color and it's straight, because I had gray hair. You know, the last 6-7 years have aged me by 20 years. And so all of a sudden I had all this gray hair, and gray hair on women, it doesn't always look as good as you think.
See, I disagree. I think women look great with gray hair.
If it's nice gray hair, but when you have curly hair.
Well, that's true for any color.
Oh, no. See, let's skill you on gray hair, because you're just starting. So gray hair is a different texture than any other hair. And this is a fact. Like, it's a different texture. So it's more coarse and seems kind of thicker, you know, just each hair itself. And so when it comes in and you have curly hair and it's coarser and thicker and sort of has a mind of its own, and it's curly, and, you know, it's like little baby hairs, because, you know, it doesn't just all of a sudden wake up one day and you're like, oh, all of this whole long piece is gray. You know, it's
right.
Little pieces coming in and growing in, your new baby hairs. And it's all up on the top of your head, and they're like, you know, 1 inch long, and they're curly. Yeah, that's not where little curly hair should be. Was that too much for you?
No, not at all. That's my 7th grade brain triggering is what that is.
I'm trying to be G-rated here. You know.
Well, so. we can definitely let a F-bomb throw off or every once in a while or whatever. I don't mind. I don't rate this for children.
Well, I did ask.
Yeah,
I did ask.
You did ask.
I reminded you who you're dealing with.
Right, which is great, because I appreciate that. But no, this one is, if you choose, there's warnings all over the place. When you download this podcast, there's all kinds of warnings that say, hey, listen, this is not for...
It's just the language, you know.
Well, it's language, but sometimes it's the topics.
In the topics.
Yeah, sometimes it's just something that you just don't want the kids in the room for.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be a blue comedy or anything like that. It could be a very serious topic that they're just not ready to consume, you know. And
I, for one, appreciate that of you.
Well, thank you. Well, that's the other thing, is I can be a kid's, you know, I love kids, and that's kind of my, I know it's the best thing that ever happened to me was to raise a little girl. Because it changed everything for the best for me. And I will always forever be grateful for that opportunity, because it changed me for the better. It changed me in a way that I stopped looking at so much negativity and looking at what could be positive and what could be possible through a young person's eyes. Because I guess at some point when, 25, when Ashley was part of my life at that point in time, my daughter, I thought I'd seen it all. I'd already been through a whole lot and all this kind of good stuff.
I've lived my life. I'm 25.
Yeah. I feel like I've done so much. Here I am 25 years later.
Yeah.
And I'm like, boy, that kid didn't know shit.
Yeah.
But that 25-year-old kid definitely still exists today. And this is a 50-year-old man who looks back and goes, wow, I've got a daughter I'm super proud of. I've got a grandson I'm super proud of that she's doing a great job trying to raise and things like that. She doesn't take much guff off of anybody, which is fantastic, and she stands up for herself. And that's something I've always wanted, to make sure that if I had a kid, that's what they would do. That's how they would act. That's how they would be. And so I was successful in that. And then, but the other thing was just to be able to see that, it goes on beyond me. There's something bigger than me out there. And it's wonderful. It's great not to have that whole, it's got to be, this is all about me. It's about others. there's something great about transferring that center of attention. And I guess we're so used to, when we're raised, to have that center of attention. So our natural, that's us. So we're pretty when we're young. And so we look into the mirror a lot. So it's a lot about us, but there's that certain breaking point. And I think it's, this is why we're fortunate when we do have kids and things like that. I think that's what I learned from my kid was there's so much more than just me. And that's what I'm always thankful for, because I get to see a bigger, broader world because of that point of view now.
It's funny because I think going back to, it's amazing that we're friends because we're so different people in a lot of ways. But which is maybe why we're friends, because we are sort of opposite in our approach or thinking, because you see that in such a positive way. And I'm sitting here as you're talking about I got to experience this and it changed, me recognizing the world isn't just about me and it's about other people. And all I can think is we live in a world currently that is so hyper focused on me and ourselves and instant gratification for ourselves. And, so much of that ability to be compassionate, to understand and recognize the places other people are coming from or are currently experiencing, we can't even do it because we can't see beyond our own mirror, our own face. We don't want to. We don't, and every messaging that we are receiving right now supports that.
A shot of JD.
We're going to take a quick break simply because we're changing out cameras and all that kind of good stuff. So just a reminder, if you would like to catch up on past Shot of JD shows, you can do so at shotofjd.simplecast.com. Once again, that website is shotofjd.simplecast.com. Now, back to our conversation with Holly Howard.
A shot of JD.
Okay, where are we?
In the middle of just talking, bullshitting, doing what we do when we're not talking about our documentary. Which, it's funny watching you be part of that creative process. Because I'm kind of used to being part of a creative process and in multimedia and doing video and thinking in those ways, audio, all that good stuff. So it's interesting to watch how you get into it and how you enter that side of the technical stuff.
I'm glad you find humor in that.
It's not just humor. It's fun to watch because I've been doing this for 30 years. Yeah. I've watched all this technology change to where now I can afford to have a 2-camera shoot in somebody's kitchen.
Yeah.
And process something that looks very cinematic and that can be I can do those things. I have those tools now. So I'm all happy about it and all that because it's wow, it's finally here. I can control my own media fate. I can do the things I've always wanted to do and I have those tools to do so. Having you come into this doorway is hey, I want to be the clicker, and you get to do the clicker thing, the clicker board. Which where is that? Where's your clicker board?
Over here.
It's over there. Here, you're going to disconnect.
Let me disconnect.
All right, you're going to disconnect, but we still got the room audio going. So yes. We'll have to share this for the camera. So this is for our production. I found this. And we were getting ready to go to Texas for part of our shoot. And in fact, we still have our Texas marking on here from July. But let's see here. There you go.
Let me.
Here. There you go. And so
I'm an expert.
And really all I need is that part so I can sync the video with better sound sources and things like that. Because as you do in a production, you have multiple recordings going at the same time when it comes to audio, because audio is key. You can have crappy video on a lot of things, But if you don't have good audio, people won't listen. So anyway, this is one of our favorite little things that we have.
The joys that
The joys.
I find in the smallest of things.
Well, but that's a good thing though that you do.
I generally don't, which is makes it even more humorous.
Well, it's part of this is when you're in a production, we're in a long form production, which is something I've rarely been a part of. It's more like, oh, well, you've got a day or you've got a few hours or maybe you have a week, to put something together or something like that. So this is a multi-year project that we're putting together because it's time and cost and things like that. Those are some of the factors. Layers and when people are available and things like that for some of the topics that we'll be covering. And so, yeah, it takes time to put those type of things together, but to watch you come to this with a fresh set of eyes, and that's the thing. It's just it's so fun to watch, and you discover these things that you do like about the technical aspect of being involved in audio and visual.
Yeah, there's.
You made fun of the AV geeks in high school, didn't you?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now
we're dorks.
Yeah. Well. I get it.
Yeah, you weren't the crowd I hung out with.
Yeah, well, I hung out with everybody though.
Yeah.
I was still that guy back in high school. I would hang out with anybody, but I was like the defender of the nerds and the geeks and those that were, didn't really fit in, the misfits, I guess. Yeah. So I had kind of a weird high school experience because my junior year to senior year, we went from Union City, my hometown, to Mustang. And Mustang would not let me transfer back to Union City, even though it was only 10 miles away. I was a licensed driver. My mother worked at the school. So there was a lot of, yeah.
Oh, we're going on education now.
Yeah. Well, let's not. No, we're tiptoeing we're just talking about the situation. So I went from being, Union City, and I was, small class, 22, all that. Then I went into my senior class at Mustang, and it was 355 students in that entire class. That was the total enrollment for the entire K through 12 system in Union City. So there was a bit of a culture shock there, but I just continued just to be me, and I met people, and I didn't care who they were. What their cliques were or anything like that. But I do remember that one of the guys that I hung out with and kind of liked and all that, the jocks used to pick on him, so one of the jocks, we got the ice ball. It was one of the icy, slushy winters, and was pelting them and all that kind of good stuff, and didn't see me coming across the whatever, the yard, the school campus yard and all that kind of good stuff. And of course I played baseball and all that kind of good stuff. So I had a pretty good arm too. And all of a sudden he's getting hit, and it was funny. My friend didn't cry, but the jock did. So, it's just kind of one of those, I don't abide by bullies.
Well, I was a loner. And, I had friends. I did not like cliques. I didn't like I'm this group or that group. So I had friends, and they just sort of might fall into one of those groups. But I was very much starting already on the path that, of who I became. And, I was fiercely independent, stubborn as hell. I didn't put up with anybody's crap. And so, I wasn't a follower. Like I had said about my style, is very eclectic. So I didn't follow the trends or, any of that. And so, I would say that high school was probably difficult in comparison to, probably if I had been in one of those groups. But in a lot of ways, high school's it's such a short point of your life. And so for me, it was like, do this, get it done, move on. Like, it wasn't end all be all.
See, that's where it sounds like you had kind of in your mind a scope of time. I think the biggest issue, we always go, oh man, every year it seems like it goes faster. It's because time is relative in more than just physics. It's time is relative in your head too, because the longer you live, that's shorter 4 years. But if you're, you go into high school, you're 13, 14 years old, and all of a sudden just, that's 1/15 of your life at that point, just your freshman year.
Yeah.
So I think it's more of, oh my gosh, there's so much to get through because of high school, because you've had so little time already. But you look back and you have that perspective. So it's interesting to hear that you had the perspective that, well, this is just a short time. I just need to get through it.
Just get through it, be done with it, go on. I didn't enjoy high school. And so I think for me, it was just easy to sort of look ahead. And I think I think that there's probably a lot of people that maybe at the time didn't recognize that, and I probably didn't either, but look back and could recognize that it wasn't an enjoyable experience. It wasn't like, I'm having a grand time, let this last forever. I was looking ahead.
So you weren't part of High School Musical, is that what you're saying?
No, I have a terrible singing voice.
You and me both, sister.
I have rhythm now. I have rhythm, but put me on a dance floor, but I'm not a singer. No.
Well, yeah, it's funny. I guess I enjoyed school, high school. I did a lot of cool things. I was prodded to do a whole lot of cool things, I guess, to keep me busy, because I wasn't, I dropped out of baseball. I didn't really play athletics, so I was more of the nerd in a small town, and so there wasn't much for the nerds to do. So my parents stirred the pot a little bit, and the gifted and talented program popped up, and things like that to try to help out, and it was really cool because I got to explore some avenues that I probably wouldn't have if it hadn't been for that program. And then when one of my favorite things is that I helped start the first academic bowl team in Union City, in Union City High School. It goes on to this day, which is really fun to hear that they continue to compete, and I was one of the first. And I remember that first buzzboard that we built and all that. But my family's always wanted, oh, you should be on Jeopardy, or you should be on Wheel of Fortune, or something like that. Because either I'm good at guessing things, or I seem to be really good at trivia. And
I could see you being good at trivia.
I had a high school teacher, and we took on the rest of the class in science. It was my biology teacher in high school. And it was one of those days where, testing is done, everything's kind of done into the school year type thing. And so they broke out the Trivial Pursuit. And that's when Trivial Pursuit was coming out hot and heavy. And everybody was like, oh, Trivial Pursuit.
Okay, so let me so your experience in high school are, what would your experiences with the teachers be like? Like, give me some.
Generally, it was just respect. There was a lot of the respect thing. I would get a lot of attention simply because, they didn't want me to get bored because I would goof off. And when I goofed off, became a distraction because I had to have kind of the attention. I became a bit of a class clown and things like that. So I played off that nerd thing big time back in high school, because I was one of the smarter kids in class. And so it was, I don't know, it was just like, I just remember having to go to the principal's office because I was so bored in a class, and I had pencils in my ear and my nose, and I was acting like a walrus. shaking my head back and forth, and distracting everybody, making them laugh. And so,
And this is high school.
This is high school. No, it was just last week in the newsroom.
Well, yeah, I can see that too. I went to a school that at that time, I think that the school size was probably around 1,500. And I was in high school when busing was, really, really big. And there was a lot of tension kind of around that. And so the school was large. There was also during that time a lot of that neighborhood violence, community violence was happening, and kind of just really getting escalating. And so there was violence sort of happening at school too, more and more often. So I don't know if that sort of made it a very serious atmosphere. And, but it's funny, I just sit here and listen to you talk about like, I'm sitting over here putting pencils in my nose and my ears. And my worry was being able to my worry was like, you don't go in the bathroom alone because that's dangerous. It was a 2-story school. So there were some of the stairwells on the end that were very isolated. You don't go on those stairwells. I remember being in the 10th grade, and that was my first experience with an older male reminding me of his power over my life as a female, and a young female, an underage female. So I just would, it's just interesting to me that, like, wonder how often there is that discrepancy, sort of like.
Oh, I think it happens all the time now.
If you have these conversations with a man and a woman, looking back on their, high school, middle school years, what the differences would be in those experiences.
My eyes have been opened even before we started this project. That was something that I was finding out, that the marked difference, just reporting, even in some of the local school districts here in central Oklahoma. I'm not going to name anything because I wasn't involved with that reporting, and I don't know names, but I do know facts, and I know certain things were going on at that time that the school kind of was not necessarily covering it up, but wasn't exactly helping to stop the situation that mostly happened off campus, but it leaked back onto campus.
And what's scary to me about that, just because, well, first of all, I raised 3 girls. As you know, I had 3 daughters. And so it was scary to me raising those 3 girls. Just trying to teach them how to be strong, independent women, but yet also kind, generous human beings with compassion for others, and sort of how do you maneuver through that, and not give yourself away, and not, put yourself in positions of risk, but being able to be strong and independent and fiercely whoever you are. But here I sit on this side later in life, having lived a lot of years, and raising these 2 girls that come from these really hard experiences. And this conversation we're having, thinking, how are these two children going to maneuver through circumstances like that? What is that? What is, I'm not a kid that had an 8 ACE score. Like, how does a kid like that maneuver through? And more, I think we have to recognize in our communities how large that number of children really is. We make these assumptions that there's just a handful of our kids around that, have these adverse experiences, have these trauma histories. It's just a few. It's just my 2. Where we live now, our school's like, I don't know what the number is now, but 400, I'm going to estimate, something like that. It's like what you grew up in, very rural. And, oblivious to them, it's just my 2. They're the only ones that are broken and have these histories. And that's not reality. Like, the reality in the world that we live today are so many children, whether it's been identified or not, whether somebody has said, oh my gosh, this child has had some history and that is going to impact them. Just like you said, you don't, and what I said, you don't have to witness it. They live in a home with domestic abuse taking place. They live in a home of poverty. They live in a home where one of their parents is a substance abuser. One of them's incarcerated. We can talk about incarceration rates in Oklahoma. We're like number 2 in the nation. So all those things have these impact on these children that we didn't previously recognize as having an impact on them. And so then they go through and they have these ongoing experiences. And I think, what would one of my girls do if their professor locked them in a room and, made an attempt to coerce them into behavior to satisfy his own needs? What would they do? And why do they have to experience that?
You're right. It's all about perspective and experience, because I come from it with a protected white appearing male,
Yeah,
because being
in the
being
world,
a
it's all
Hispanic,
about appearance. So you're a white male. I'm sorry.
a white male by appearance.
Nobody's gonna care what you're.
Right. I could give all the excuses.
Yeah.
Say my grandmother's from Mexico.
They don't care.
And
You're white.
I never got. But yeah, I get the white privilege, and I know that I do because my poor Mexican brothers and sisters. Sometimes what they have to go up against, but. No. As a protected white male that had 2 parents that stayed together, we had our familial issues, but there was never the violence in the home. There was never really, it was always mom and dad argued, but there was never any really bad disrespect. There was no name calling, and dad never, ever lifted a hand to her. I mean, there was never, if you look at the size difference between my mom and my dad, my mom was about your size, about 5'2", and my dad's 6'3", and my mom would be, in the arguments would be the one putting her finger in his chest, So there wasn't that fear of a repercussion from him. And I thought that's the way, I guess that's the way it's supposed to work, because it's the way I approach things. I had that, and, I was taught by both parents, you never raise your hand to a woman, period. I am guilty of one thing, one of them, and that's my little sister at a time when I was under 18, so you can't charge me for it,
That's just Big Brother being rude.
Right. But that was also the learning point. That was the point of inflection where, we have a problem, Houston. We're going to take care of it. And I had two parents that took care of it.
But it's not even like, so let me educate you a little bit.
Please do.
Because you get to educate me on all the techie stuff. So I get to be the one that picks your bones apart. I'm like a vulture. You, again, go back to this, the physical. And though I don't disagree with what you're saying, 100% you're right. Should never lay a hand, and same goes for women. We should never lay a hand on another person. It's unacceptable. But it's well beyond that. It isn't, because abuse isn't about a physical attack. It is about power and control. So ultimately, what environment were you raised in? What was the messaging to you? And how you received it, how you interpreted that messaging, and how you were able to use that in the world in which you lived. And that's what you grew up in and created you to be who you are. No desire to hold power and control over another human being, primarily over a more a person that could be in a position that you could have influence over.
Right.
And so that's what we have to do different, and start to recognize. And not only do we have to do it on the front end over here, where we have people that are misinterpreting what that is and saying, well, I never hit her, or as though that is the thing.
Right. It's the manipulation into accepting
way
the thing.
Back before then.
Right.
We have to get on the back end of this and stop teaching this patriarchal sort of misogynistic view. We have to stop man-upping boys and feminizing girls. And the new thing is, well, that, we're feminizing boys. This is all coming out of the fears relating to transgender issues and all of that. And so, we're hearing that, like, oh, we have to stop feminizing our boys. Like, what? You got to be even more like rough and it's so wrong. It is so wrong. And this starts happening so early, and it's not even just parents. And I'm not saying it's parents. It's mainly what's happening outside of us. So it's the media, it's the social media, which is consuming us all. It's all of those things and all the messaging, and their whole agenda is to make money. And so that's what the messaging that they're going to use. And so teaching these boys, like, oh, men don't cry, boys don't cry, get out there and be tough. And, it has become such an extreme, and it's in everything that we look at. And you don't even recognize it because we're so desensitized to it. So we don't even see it anymore. But if we don't get on the back end of that, and be on the front end of it, there's nothing that we can do in between except continue to stick a Band-Aid on the problems as they come up. So all we're doing is reacting, and we're not being proactive to try to stop or at least decrease this from happening. It's to me one of the most difficult positions that I sit in is just sitting here and when I hear people talk and their misinformation about what domestic abuse really is, about the struggles that women face, about the struggles that our children and the challenges that they're going to face, and the disconnect that this doesn't happen to us. We're the like, this never happened to us, versus that, that happens over there, and so therefore it doesn't impact me. And that disconnect, because that does impact you. It impacts every single one of us. If you're alive and breathing and you live in the world, it has an impact on you. You're going to have an intersection with one of those children, either as a child or an adult, and they are not going to be the same because of those experiences. You're going to have an intersection with one of those parents. They're not going to be the same. Let's break it down let's talk about money, because we all pay taxes, and the cost to all of us, because there is a loss when a woman can't work, when the children, because of what they experience as children, when they grow up and they're unable to hold jobs, they're, besides the social type programs and services that they might eventually connect with and need, which we pay because of our taxes, just the loss of the productivity of all the people involved. And it doesn't just happen to the man and the woman, or woman and man, or whatever. It doesn't just happen to those two people. It is like, it's like a tornado. It's like rain. It affects, it just spreads out from this nucleus, of all these other people, and the impact on them. The children, the children's teachers, the grandparents, if there's grandparents, the brothers and sisters of the perpetrator and the victim, their friends, their employers. It's an effect that's just like a ripple effect that comes out from all. It's like, where does it stop? I don't know. Because, every person I come in contact with, you live in my zone, and you're going to get touched by this, And so when I hear you talk about, your dad never hit your mom, and all these things. And I'm so glad. And I'm so glad that you were taught some of those ideas of respect other people, not just respect another woman, but respect other humans, just period. But we have to stop that messaging, and we really have to start understanding how it really affects all of us, and the fact is, you take, and I told you this, I warned you, this changes you, because you can't live it, you can't know it, you can't hear about it and it not change you. If it doesn't change you, if it doesn't impact you, you're a scary person. How many times have you dropped a glass bowl or your coffee mug and it breaks? You remember?
Right.
All those, you remember super glue commercials?
Right.
With the guy hanging in the helmet,
right.
Did you ever try that? Mm-mm. Oh my God, I did.
No, I never tried it.
Because I could never figure out how to make my head stay in the helmet.
Yeah, that was the biggest issue. You know how they did it?
Because he was standing up.
He was standing up.
Okay, so if you break your coffee mug and then you take your super glue out And you put your little pieces back together and you super glue them, and probably, you've super glued your finger on there a couple of times, and your finger to your thumb and all that. But you get your pieces all put back together. Are those seams perfect? Like, do you see where it was broken? Is that cup ever going to be like it was before you dropped it?
No.
It may be put back together and it may hold coffee. You have to be a little more gentle with it. Maybe not put it in the dishwasher. Maybe there were some little tiny chips that you just couldn't get stuck back in there just right. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you can make it look really good on the outside, but you look inside that cup and you can see those cracks. You can tell it was broken. That's representative of what these children that live in these environments and grow up with these experiences and those trauma histories, that's what it is. Break a coffee cup tomorrow. Try to super glue it back together. Do it the best you can. Try to make it perfect. It will never be the same. It will always have those scars and those cracks. And it's not going to hold up quite as well as the coffee mugs that didn't get broken. So, there's my analogy.
And that is my co-executive producer on the documentary that we're working on called The Pieces Which Remain, which focus on a grandmother raising her grandchildren who were witness to abuse in a domestic relationship. There's a lot more to that. That was a lot to say, but there's a lot more to that. And so stay tuned. We'll give you updates and things like that as we approach. But Holly, thank you so much. Because, yeah, you're right. I got changed. I got changed big time by all this. But I don't mind the changes because I feel like I can lend a voice and hopefully something positive will come out of this. But more than anything, I do think something positive has come out of it because we've become even stronger friends instead of just acquaintances. And after all this project's done, I don't know what I'm going to do. We're going to have to come up with a part 2 or something.
I'm sure that we will. I'm sure that we can find something to, be antagonistic about. Leave that to me.
There you go. All right. Well, we got to get to work, guys. So thank you, everybody. It's my friend Holly Howard. Be ready to see some amazing things come out and telling this story about what a lot of people need to know about.
Bye.
A shot of JD.
I got to thank my friend Holly Howard very much for doing that. I know she was a little hesitant when I brought it up, but I said, no. Let's talk about the project. Of course, the project is The Pieces Which Remain. And I think it's going to be a very powerful message. I hope it gets out there and makes some lives better. I really, really hope so, because that's an important element to the project and using my skills and my time to be able to get that message out. So I'm hoping that you will pick that up and check it out when it becomes available. And of course, you can keep it around here to all the social media channels.
Man, how can people get in touch with you if they want to, reach out to you via technology?
I'm on Twitter.
Yep, I'm on Twitter, even though Elon Musk owns it. I don't have a problem with whoever owns it. I still use Twitter, and that's at Jason Doyle. And remember, I'm the original at Jason Doyle because there's other Jason Doyles that have other numbers and stuff like that, but it's just plain old at Jason Doyle on Twitter. It's Jason Doyle Broadcasted over on Facebook if you want to find all my exploits when it comes to media projects. And then our YouTube page is Jason Doyle Media. That's where you can see some of the creative video stuff that I do from time to time. And if you ever want to reach out and communicate directly without social media, you can always drop me an email over at shotofjdpodcast@gmail.com. All of that, once again, over on Twitter at Jason Doyle, Facebook, Jason Doyle Broadcasted, YouTube is Jason Doyle Media, and if you want to send me the old-fashioned email, shotofjdpodcast@gmail.com.
Oh, sorry, folks. We run out of time. Shame.
Once again, thank you very much to my friend Holly Howard for taking part of the Shot of JD with Friends podcast. And thank you for listening all the way through. If you want to catch up on past episodes, check out shotofjd.simplecast.com. And coming very soon, thepieces.which.remain.com. That's going to feature our documentary with Holly Howard. Check out other episodes at shotofjd.simplecast.com.
I didn't make anybody stay here until 7 a.m. or 11 or whenever it is everybody finally left. I didn't make this kid pass out on my floor. People wanted to be here. That was their decision.
Stay in school and don't let nobody bully you.
A Shot of JD.